All join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for showing up. Nice to see you all here. I had this funny memory as I was doing my offering. Told the story a while ago, some of you might have heard it. Actually, I've been telling the same stories for 20 years, so you've probably heard them all by now. But this was at the old Buddha for You location, and we had just recreated another meditation hall shrine room in the back. And we had been using the same one for a while, so we had a new one. And I was trained in a very formal, ritual type way, just kind of very strict, disciplined, military style stuff. And so for me, everything was just routine a certain way, and you get in the habit, and that's how you do it all the time. And so there it was the very first night we were doing a sit-in and a talk in the new kind of setup. And so I go up to the shrine and I approach it and I'm doing my offerings and I'm all formal, getting ready to go. And I go down and I bow my head and I just smacked my head on the shrine. It was the funniest thing. And it was loud and everybody laughed. Actually, no, I think everybody kind of froze. I laughed. I didn't know what to do. And I just started laughing. And it was one of those things where, to me, you have moments along the way where you realize like how this stuff helps you and where it works. As just lay people, practitioners trying to get through our day like everybody else. And, there was a time in my life where if I did that, Buddhist setting or not, oh my God, I would have been so embarrassed or humiliated or ashamed or afraid or, oh no, what does everybody think? And I just smacked my head on the shrine and I just thought it was the funniest thing in the world. And once I started laughing, then it was almost like it gave people permission or this okay to laugh with me, as opposed to them feeling like they were laughing at me, which also would have been totally appropriate. But some of the greatest Zen teachers I've ever learned from, they laugh a lot. And I think humor with practice is really important. If we look at our suffering, right? Our dukkha, our discomfort, our angst, our dissatisfaction, if we look at the conflict and challenges and struggles in our lives, and we can't bring some sense of humor to it, man, your mind's going to be a really dark place all the time, and it's going to be really scary. So for me, it helps to be able to look at some of like the madness that's in your own head. I mean, still to this day, I laugh at some of the shit that pops into my head. I'm like, really? You still think that? Like, that's the dumbest thing in the world. And I just learned to laugh at it. And then, in theory, ideally not act on it is usually what follows. But the thoughts come up first. And I've just always found humor in life to be really beneficial as a form of practice. I've not yet read the Laughing Sutra taught by the Buddha. But if I look at the teachings on non-attachment, the teachings on non-self, the teachings on overcoming cravings and desires and things like that, all of that comes from this idea and view that we hold towards ourselves or the world being a certain fixed way. And if we can learn to shatter some of that, I think that's where a lot of the humor comes from. So if you don't have much humor in your life, and a lot of you maybe don't have much at all, That's the reality of it. If you don't have much humor in your life, think about ways that you can bring humor into your day-to-day life. Laughing, it puts a smile on your face. It eases things, and if that means cartoons, if that means comics, whatever. But try to figure out where in your life you find humor. Who laughs a lot in here? At what?
Things I've seen before that remind me of just how funny it was the first time.
Yeah, what else? Who laughs?
My kids.
Your kids, yeah. And they're not with you tonight, so you can say
I
that.
can say that.
Yeah, but you would have said it if they were here anyways.
But that's myself as well. That's
Yeah.
what I said.
Yeah. Myself. Self, what else? What do you laugh at? There were more hands. Go ahead.
I love almost anything.
Anything. Nice. You probably would have loved me hitting my head on the shrine there. What else? It was hysterical. Yeah. Who else laughs a lot? Yeah.
I just laugh at the weirdness of life.
Yeah. It's pretty strange, isn't it?
Yeah, it gives you a million things to laugh at every day.
Totally.
In myself and outside.
Yeah, definitely.
I laugh at awkward moments.
Awkward moments.
Yeah.
I laugh and try to find humor in extremely tense situations, just to try to snap my mind out of it.
Definitely. Anyone else want to share? We'll do one more. Yeah.
I laugh at the ego when it starts to freak out.
The ego. Yeah, that damn ego. Yeah. One more. I just see a hand attached.
I laugh when the occasion rises for it, so I try to find that moment at any time, really.
Yeah,
Laughter is the best medicine.
definitely. My mom still says, you can either laugh or cry. So I found laughter to be much healthier than crying. Although crying's healthy too. So. All right. You're still laughing. I didn't say anything funny. You're not kidding. All right. So welcome to those who are joining virtually. Thanks for showing up. Feel free to say hello as you are. There's a chat box on your screen somewhere. We'll start with the meditation practice for those who might be new or here for the first time. A couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you, right? Not going to float away. Not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. I mean, you don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you want to be comfortable. If you are on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. If you're on a bench or chair, also just trying to sit up straight. Hands on the knees or lap, whatever's comfortable. Keeping the chin upright, head, imagine there's a string just gently pulling you up, keeping your spine straight. If you need to move during meditation, simply move, return to stillness. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator, it just means you need to move. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important with this practice, do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, release that thought, return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Return to breath. Keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. Slowly opening the eyes. Slowly beginning to move. Holding attention on yourself. And most important with this practice is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samutpata, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for all of us, regardless where you come from or what you believe in and where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to every other 20-minute period of your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, meditation doesn't fix that. It helps you become aware of why your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess so you can make changes. This is direct perception into the present moment. And the present moment is very often filled with conflict, chaos, difficulty, challenges. That's it. It's learning to be with life as it arises, as opposed to doing what most do, which is run from everything. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else you encounter every moment of your life, and that's it. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, which is where we spend so much of our time, hoping they do this, hoping they do that, wishing they would do this, wishing they would do that. We spend so much time focused on the actions of others. This practice is focusing on our thoughts, our words, and our actions. That's it. It's pretty simple if you look at the heart of these teachings. Be mindful of body, speech, mind, thoughts, words, actions. So for me, always, I really just prefer to respond to questions. I think I'll just pause there and open up to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with, and we use the rest of our brief time for that. And again, for those who are joining virtually, welcome, glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. Feel free, as you are, there's a chat box there, say hello if you have any questions. I'll do my best to respond to those as well. So, thoughts, questions?
This might sound a little strange, but
I doubt it. I've heard a lot, man, but go ahead.
in my meditation practice recently, and also in this meditation, I found when I start going deeper, sometimes my body, without me consciously trying to, starts kind of waving back and forth, just ever so gently. Sometimes it's even like, not quite so gently. So like I might knock into him or something. I kind of consciously was able to slow it down, but have you ever experienced that? And if so, I'm wondering if maybe anyone else has experienced that. 'Cause that's
How many times have you been here?
This is my first time.
Oh, okay. I was just trying to gauge how nice I'm going to be, that's all. But since it's your first time, I won't be nice at all. So, a couple things. One, anytime, well, it's not strange at all, that question, so let me just get that out of the way. So don't ever feel like it's strange. I mean, I was expecting strange. That was nothing.
Okay.
A couple
It
things.
feels strange to me, and I'm not sure if I'm like.
Understood. I would stop. Hang on. Yeah. There are a billion things that could happen to you during meditation. My suggestion always is, as you start on this journey or are newer to this journey, is to not expect or look for anyone to tell you that that's right or wrong or good or bad. Right? 1,000 people lead you meditation, lead you 1,000 different ways. What I first suggest for somebody who's pretty new to this practice, I'm guessing, is to become aware of it. Not good, not bad, not right, not wrong. Okay? Just be aware of what is occurring. It's like when people say they see colors. Whether I've experienced anything you're asking about is absolutely irrelevant. I'm just some dude sitting here and you're some dude sitting there. So what my experiences are, and this is just in general as you start your journey into Buddhist stuff, I wouldn't get wrapped up in kind of this comparison of like, well, does it happen to you? Does it happen to everyone else? Doesn't matter. What matters is what happens to you. Does that make sense so far? Yeah. So that I would start there always. To add to that, now, very specifically you said when you start getting deeper in your meditation. Now, I'm the worst guy you want to say that to, right? That's why I said I was pondering how new you were and how nice I want to be. To me, with meditation practice, there's nowhere to go. There is no deeper, right? I'm a Zen practitioner. Sensation of breath, the Buddha taught, Anapanasati Sutta. When breathing in, know that you're breathing in, taking a short breath. If you're breathing out, taking a long breath, know that you're breathing out, taking a long breath. It's simple awareness and observation of breath. I'm also one who sits during meditation with my eyes open. I'm not like staring at everybody, but I'm gazing about 2 feet off the edge of the nose, 2 feet in front of you. And so when one says they went deeper, present moment is just present moments, right? Now, very often, what people mean when they say that, and even on the description that you described of this and that, those of you who know me, what am I going to say he was probably doing? Sleeping. Now, you might not like that. That might not sit well with you. That might not resonate with you. But chances are what you're referring to as going deeper in your meditation is just you starting to fall asleep. Nothing wrong with that. Doesn't make you didn't fail, right? You're not a bad person, a bad Buddhist, a bad meditator. It just means that most likely your eyes are closed. You're starting to kind of daydream, night dream, wander. And when we sleep, our body moves. And as it moves, it startles us. Because we're aware of the fact that we're sitting here, but we're starting to fall asleep. So we throw ourselves back to the center, right? So I can be totally wrong. I'm not you. I'm not sitting there. I don't know what you're experiencing. But for me, deeper into meditation doesn't resonate. It's a matter of just awareness. Now, if you have a very specific focus or meditation practice or some master who's trained you on something, and you're going deeper with whatever that may be, then that could potentially apply. But chances are you're just wandering in your thought process. And that's what most people do, right? What I often talk about is the moment that I hit the bell, at the end of meditation, I hit the bell. And often people feel as if they have to come back to the space. Oh, it took me a while to come back. Where did you go? Sitting here and breathing is just sitting here and breathing. So it doesn't mean you're a bad meditator. It just means that most likely your mind was wandering to, dinner, to second grade, to what happened, yesterday. Like, it just goes places. And meditation is a training. It's not escaping. It's not going anywhere. It's training to be present. Why? When we get angry, when we get sad, when we get depressed, our mind is often where? Thinking about something that happened past. Our mind starts to wander to the future. We get stressed, we get anxious, we get fear, we get worried. Meditation is a concentration and focus on the present moment. And that's used with the breath. Or that's why we use the breath. That's what's present. Nowhere to go. Sitting, breathing, present. To me, this is the practice. What else?
Divisive speech.
Divisive speech.
Yeah.
You have it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes, something that I feel like I struggle with.
Sure. So in the Buddhist teachings, there's, to give a brief background, that wasn't even the question, but the comment was simply divisive speech. And knowing you, that was all I needed to hear, right? So in the Buddhist teachings, there's what's referred to as right speech, Eightfold Path, right? Four Noble Truths, suffering, cause of suffering, end of suffering, and the path that leads to ending of suffering. Okay, the first one, we all suffer. Doesn't mean life sucks, it just means we have discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. That's the first one. Second one is the cause. Attachment, craving, also referred to as the three poisons, greed, anger, ignorance. We overcome that with the practice of generosity, compassion, and wisdom. Third noble truth is the ending of suffering, nirvana, liberation, freedom from suffering. Yay, we're good to go. The fourth is the Eightfold Path. And that is having correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. All of that's on Google for free. Just stay on the first 2 pages, right? So looking at right speech. The Buddha taught very clearly a number of things within right speech, and I'm just touching on it to give it some context. Any of you gossip? Thank you for being honest, right? We're not talking about morality tonight, but at least we got one honest person in the room, right? So, gossip. Slander. Any of you say harsh things about other people or put people down? All right. Lying. Anybody here lie? We're up to 2 now. We're good. Divisive speech. So, this idea of divisive speech, when the precepts were put into place at the time of the Buddha for the Sangha, which was the monks and then the nuns, all of these precepts were in place to keep a harmonious Sangha community. So it's not as if the Buddha sat down and made up a bunch of rules for everybody. He observed what was happening, and as things occurred that created conflict or unhealthy situations in the Sangha, precepts went into place. And if you look at the Vinaya, I'm not a scholar, I don't study it to this depth, but if you look at the Vinaya, which is the kind of the moral, this is the precepts, the moral ethical conduct of these teachings, all of the reasons that the precepts went into place are there. So divisive speech at the time was anything that really drove a wedge, for lack of a better term, between, say, 2 people or a part of the Sangha, a part of the community. Now let's bring that to today, right? And if you have family members that you kind of get stuck in the middle of situations and you say, did I hit it on the head already?
Well, friends, but
right?
or
And so
very
we're
close people.
Stuck in the middle. And we say things that drive wedges between groups of friends, family members, colleagues. Anyone ever been at work and said something to somebody knowing that it might cause conflict between other people that will make us look good? Today. Well, there you go. Right? So I think it's important first to recognize, which obviously you are because you're asking, that it's occurring. And then to ask yourself, why? Why am I saying these things that are causing conflict, that are causing people to split. And almost always, it comes back to what?
Yeah.
Me. I want the situation to work how I want it to. I want the people to think how I want them to think, and I want to make sure that my ego, my sense of self, everything I'm trying to protect is okay. So I will say whatever I can to split whoever I can to make sure I'm okay. That's what's typically going on. All of these precepts come down to that, is that we are focused on the ego and the self. And if we learn to kind of set some of that down a little bit, then maybe there's not so much need to try to drive a wedge between people or to, become closer with one and push the other out or whatever it might be. God knows I spent years doing all of this, so I know it really well. It's exhausting. It's toxic. It's potentially dangerous and just painful. And it very often comes from a place of we are suffering. We're not okay with the situation, so we feel that we must use our speech to try to split situations. And if you continue to get rid of that sense of self and not make it all about you,
Thanks.
yeah, good luck. What else? Yeah, back there, and then we'll go here. Yeah, sorry.
Been meaning to say this for quite a while, and I guess the opportunity just presented itself. When we come out of when we finish the breathing exercise, you always ask, how do you feel now?
Yeah.
How does that compare to how you normally feel? Which do you like better? I feel awesome. I feel relaxed. I feel focused. I feel whole. During the day, when I'm doing legal research, trying to outsmart somebody legally, juggling 15 things in my hand at once, I feel alive. I feel awesome. I prefer this feeling here, I guess. Because I love that feeling as well.
Yeah.
So I guess it's more of a comment rather than a question.
For sure.
But help me, Obi-Wan.
No, I got nothing. I got this thing is a mess. So I can't, by this thing meaning my mind. I think that my main point in sharing that, and back to the earlier kind of comment, is to recognize that when meditation begins and meditation ends, and our day begins and our day ends, and we're going through our day out there, that ultimately there should be no difference. What changes is, or I should say what I think is important to recognize, is what is the intention behind everything. So even though you feel alive, you feel awesome, you feel wonderful there doing that, and that's your livelihood, and here you say the same thing, feel awesome, feel alive, feel wonderful, whatever. This is just another thing to ponder for the next 6 months. What are the intentions behind each of them? Because that will begin to impact your heart, your mind, your emotions. When we become very mindful and aware of why we do what we do, why we think, why we speak, and why we act, and we look at the intention behind it, it tells us a lot. So, yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah.
My question kind of goes along with the device of speech to tag on to that. So somebody once said the speech should be like kind and necessary, and there are certain attributes to that. Now, what happens to me sometimes is that there'll be a disagreement, and the two people think that they're right. And then sometimes I just decide to not respond, to not say anything at all. And that sometimes makes it even worse. Why don't you say anything? All of a sudden you stop arguing or whatever it is, and then I say, well, there's a saying that if the speech is, what you say is not kind or necessary, then just don't say anything at all.
Yeah.
And it kind of seems a little bit, well, it is perceived sometimes as a little bit of aggressive, but do you have any suggestions on how to handle that?
Yeah, it's tough, and you will often hear it kind of phrased as, with speech, is it honest, is it timely, is it necessary, is it true, honest, and like that. So people phrase it different ways, and when you said that, it sounded very much like something you could read where they talk about that in that order. Every situation is different. It's not like you turn to page 17 and it tells you exactly how to respond, but I will agree that, yes, absolutely, this idea of, right speech doesn't necessarily nor always mean silence. Silence is not always the best answer. Very often silence is the worst answer. It depends on the situation and the condition. That's why, and I'm not a big kind of hypothetical person, but that's why it depends. But I had a friend years ago, and him and his partner, they would always fight. And he got all into Buddhism, and he's like, well, I'm Buddhist now, I don't fight. Right? How well do you think that went over with her? Not so well. Because because it can be, and you said perception, it can be perceived as if very passive, you don't care. So, I read a lot, and I really admire the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh, he was an activist. And he walked alongside and fought with Martin Luther King. And speech was necessary, and it was honest, and it was harsh, but it was true to him. And it was coming from an intention of love and compassion. That's why, like always, when people are brand new, and they ask a question, I'm in my head, I'm not kidding. What's your name? The new guy.
Trenton.
Say again?
Trenton.
Trenton. When someone's new and they ask a question, I'm literally like going through my head like, fuck, he's new. Should I be nice? Should I not be nice? Should I be honest? Should I be lying to him? Because I don't want to shatter people. But to me, the Dharma literally translates to truth. Right? We look at the word Dharma, as the teachings of the Buddha. But the word Dharma is ultimate truth. True reality. Reality beyond our perception. Everything we perceive is not reality. Dharma is ultimate reality. We cannot perceive it because we're lost in our own ignorance. We're lost in our greed, our cravings, our desires. Right? So truth, speech, in Buddhism I like to use the word discernment, where often the word judgment kind of gets a little cloudy, but discernment means with ultimate wisdom, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, we try to discern what is going to be the most, another kind of Buddhist word is upaya, means skillful means. So what is going to be the most skillful response in this situation? And for me, I always come back to, what's my intention? Is my intention to bring kindness, love, compassion, helping, honesty into the situation? Or is my intention just to make sure, I'm safe or whatever? You have to kind of discern each situation differently. That's the best non-answer I can give you. Yeah, I see a hand.
That's awesome. Most of us just go for that. I want to nuke it. If it's a disagreement, I want to end this, and you just pull the big red button and just shut everything off.
Mm-hmm.
That's messed up. Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Total victory. Thanks, ego.
Thanks.
On it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if bringing up an idea from Taoism wouldn't be helpful here. It's sort of the idea of non-action.
Yeah.
Is that, non-action is different from either avoiding action or acting stupidly, both of which involve ego.
Sure.
And as I understand it, the idea of non-action is to do, because you always got to do, even if you sit on your tail and say nothing, you're doing, is to do what brings harmony.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can mean, sitting on your tail, and sometimes that can mean going nose to nose with somebody and say, fuck you. If that's what needs to get done to harmonize the situation. And as you said, it's discernment and it, what's appropriate in that particular scene.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And I think, Dalai Lama always says, if you can't help people, at least don't harm them. The only thing I would caution, just to throw out there, is, to express those words to somebody, the F you. The words are not always what matters from a practice standpoint. Because people are going to perceive them how they're going to perceive them. What matters is, what is your intention and what's in your heart and your mind when you say something like that? So if you were to say that to somebody, and you're filled with anger and hatred and rage, not the practice. Yeah.
And what can someone do to cultivate the proper wisdom and compassion to have the right discernment on when to use the more aggressive stance or something more passive?
That is the question, right?
What the practice?
Yeah. So the question was, for those who didn't hear it, is what can one do to cultivate more wisdom, to have the right discernment, to know how to respond in each situation? For me, the practice of understanding wisdom begins, right? You look at the second noble truth, cause of suffering, greed, anger, ignorance. We overcome greed with generosity. We overcome anger with compassion. We overcome ignorance with wisdom. So the question is, how do we cultivate wisdom? Right? That's in essence what you're asking. And for me, there's a couple things. One, anytime anyone asks about wisdom, I always point out that there was a time where the Buddha asked Subhuti, who was considered the wisest, one of his wisest disciples, to give a discourse on shunyata, emptiness, wisdom. And Subhuti sat down. You know what he said? Right? He said nothing. And the Buddha said, in essence, good job, So one, I always learn from that anytime anyone brings up wisdom, I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is what wisdom is, right? But what I can say as a practitioner for me, I know when what I'm thinking, saying, or doing is coming from a place of ignorance. So if I can spend every day, every moment, as much time as possible, being aware, this is the first step, being aware of what is my ignorance, and begin to kind of break that down and see, why am I being so ignorant? What's it coming from? And allow that to settle. By default, less ignorance is greater wisdom. Now, I think ultimately, from a very technical practice, the sitting and breathing is the way. The practice of non-self is the answer to your question. How do we cultivate greater wisdom? It's to embody, embrace, abide in non-self. Because in any situation that we are faced with, if we can remove the sense of self, for those who are brand new to Buddhism, non-self doesn't mean you don't exist. It doesn't mean you're not here. It doesn't mean you're just, it means you're here completely different from how you perceive yourself to be. So you exist. You are here, just completely differently from how you perceive yourself to be. So non-self is the practice of abiding in presence without ego, without attachment to self. And if I can respond in any situation without attachment to ego and self, then that's ultimate wisdom. And the way to cut through the sense of self and the ego and the attachment to me is to sit and breathe, right? As Dogen, the great Zen master, lived 1200 to 1253, he would say, abide in sensation of breath to where the body and mind fall away. And there you are in sensation of breath. And from that place, you have ultimate wisdom. Now, I have absolutely no idea what that is like, but it sure sounds good, doesn't it? Yeah. So if you get there first, you let me know. Yeah. My money's on you. Yeah.
Just invite Om Mani Padme Hum.
Om Mani Padme Hum, yes. So Om Mani Padme Hum, the mantra, literally translates to the jewel in the lotus, right? It's a Tibetan mantra. Couple things about it. Kuan Yin, the statue in the middle there, Kuan Yin, her name literally means hear the world's cries. So she hears all the suffering in the world and then pours out compassion to heal. That's the base, often holding or pouring out the base of compassion, right? There's a Tibetan version. If you look to your right, you see that tanka there on the wall, that art piece? So that's called a 1,000-armed Kuan Yin. That was her. The story is that she was pouring out so much compassion that her entire body exploded. So the Buddha came in and gave her 1,000 arms and 11 heads so she could continue to heal in all directions. Because if you got 1,000 arms and 11 heads, you can see a lot of stuff. So you can see all the compassion. But her mantra that she would recite is Om Mani Padme Hum. And that means literally the jewel in the lotus. So it's often referred to as the Great Compassion Mantra. You know what a prayer wheel is? You ever seen, you remember the old Eddie Murphy movie, the I Want the Knife thing? You ever seen that? Somebody here? There you go. Thank you very much. That works too. So those are called prayer wheels. And very often, not always, they have different prayers on them. But as you turn them, you're turning the wheel of compassion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I thought it was a cleanse. I was reading it, it says it's a cleanse or whatever. And if you repeat it over and over, it's supposed to reverse bad energy.
I mean, that's the problem with reading, right? But cleanse is a very, 2024 American way to refer to, thousands of year-old Tibetan mantras. But let me just add, it's very often referred to as a purification practice, which is very different from, the way we tend to see a cleanse. But the idea is to purify, and different schools of Buddhism will teach this differently, but the idea is to purify your karma, your past karma, your negative karma, your karma that's caused tons of pain and suffering. And so as you recite the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum, it's a purification practice. My master always said you could recite the name of the Buddha and you could recite Coca-Cola. What matters most is what's in your mind and in your heart when you're doing these purification practices. Because if you're just reciting the name, and you're turning your mala beads, or you're turning the handheld prayer wheel, or whatever it is, and you're just reciting Om Mani Padme Hum, but you're thinking about all kinds of other madness, you're just saying words. So the idea behind mantras and prayers and reciting sutra and things like that in Buddhism in a very formal ritual way is to actually become one. That is your meditative practice. You become one with that. Not we're all one, we're not all one, we're all different, but you become, there is no separation between you and the mantra. Because there is no you. There's just the mantra. Yeah, go ahead. I think we'll do one more. Yeah, go ahead. Hey.
Why do you think that Buddha focused his teaching on suffering? From an outsider's perspective, one could be like, oh, those pessimistic Buddhists are always saying everything's suffering.
Right.
I heard one Dharma talk from one of the monks from Ajahn Chah's lineage. They were saying, well, if you don't like the perception of suffering, you can flip it and say it's based on happiness, right?
Sure.
So if you take the Four Noble Truths, instead of saying suffering exists, happiness exists, there's a cause of happiness. The way to happiness is the Eightfold Path.
Yeah.
Why do you think the Buddha focused strictly on the suffering portion? Do you think that's because people relate to it more than happiness?
It's a great question, and I'll close with this thought. These are obviously just my ignorant, unenlightened views on it as everything else, but I used to ponder that quite a bit. Years ago, somebody said, it was someone I had known for a long time, and they told me that, say 20 years ago, they picked up a Buddhist book, and they opened it up and they read that life was suffering, on the first page. And they're like, well, that sucks. I'm not reading that anymore. Like you said, how miserable and depressing is that, right? The Buddha says we will be born, we age, we get sick, and we die. And life is suffering. That just sounds miserable, right? But that is the reality. That's actually what happens. So why do I think the Buddha chose that way I can't pretend to know what the Buddha was thinking, but I will say, I think this played a role in it. At the time of the Buddha, right? I'm all for, this kind of modern, let's put a positive spin on everything, fake it till you make it, be positive, helps you get through your day. I'm all for that if we need to do it, absolutely. But at the time of the Buddha, it's important to understand, as I know you know, that at that time in India, this is 500 years before Christ, in India, they all believed, for the most part, in the cycle of rebirth. They weren't showing up at some Dharma Bum Temple trying to learn Buddhism so they could get through their day and be happy, right? They were actually trying to liberate themselves from suffering. And at that time, the only way to liberate yourself from suffering was what? One way only.
Dying.
No. Come on, aren't you listening? Dying, at that time, everybody believed in rebirth, right? I mean, how many of you showed up here tonight hoping you have a positive rebirth? Nobody.
So nirvana.
Just stop. At the time, they knew that when they died, they were going to be reborn. The only way to free yourself from suffering was to stop yourself from being reborn. To free yourself from the cycle of samsara, the cycle of rebirth. So at the time, people weren't learning Buddhism to make sure they were happy. They weren't miserable and depressed all day long and then going to like a 7 o'clock Dharma talk to hope that they can get happy. They knew they were going to continuously be reborn, and the only way to end suffering was to get off the cycle of rebirth. So he wasn't needing to convince people that rebirth was real or existed. Everybody was already programmed to think that way. Now fast forward to today, and you tell people you're going to be reborn, and they're like, huh? Right? So I think, to your question, why do I think he did it that way? Because it was an audience of people that already knew rebirth was occurring. And they weren't there to make sure they were just happy. I also think that, well, I won't go there, but we are using, in a modern day, Buddhist teachings beautifully, I believe. But also very different. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with people using Buddhist teachings to be happy. But Dalai Lama writes a book titled The Art of what? Happiness. Because what does everybody in a Western culture want and crave and desire? Happiness. When you are happy, what does that typically mean? You got what? Everything you wanted. And what does the Buddha say is the cause of suffering?
Craving.
Craving, desire, chasing after what we want. Dalai Lama is a pretty smart dude, right? His name is the Ocean of Wisdom. Pretty smart. So in English, it's titled The Art of Happiness. Because he knows that's what everybody wants in this culture, is to be happy. So you take, I think, in essence, he answered your question. The book title, and that was a bestseller, the book title wasn't The Art of Suffering. The Art of Happiness. I also think, and this is the last thing I'll say before we close, I also think that the word dukkha, which was the word for suffering, translated in English to suffering, is a terrible translation of the word. People I've learned from the past, I much prefer discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction, things that just don't seem right. Because suffering is so heavy, so traumatic. Right? It's too hot, it's too cold, I don't like my hair, my shirt doesn't match my shoes, right? I don't want mayonnaise on my sandwich. These are the little things that you suffer from every day. This is dukkha. Not going to be the end of the world because you got mayonnaise on a sandwich and you don't like mayonnaise. Not going to be the end of the world if your belt doesn't match your shoes. Or if your shirt doesn't match your bag. But how many years have we been told that all that stuff is supposed to match? That is dukkha. You know? That ain't happy. So.
In that same vein, happiness also has a very broad meaning.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, there's, 100%. Yeah. Agreed. So, so we'll join palms and close on that. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. All right, before you all head out, just a few quick announcements from our Dharma Bum host, Anna. Thanks, Anna.
Hello everyone, I'm tonight's host Anna. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers and are not looking for students. They're simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone with addiction, and our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and also posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We have a lending library, and if you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it, then bring it back whenever you are done with it. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out. If a few people could stay to close and latch the windows, that would be helpful. Thank you for being here. We wish you well and hope to see you all again.